千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we take a deep dive into the Tao Te Ching by Laozi. I would like to extend a warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. I would like to invite you to center your thoughts and direct your attention to this moment in time, to the here and now, to be fully present and mindfully aware as we all ready ourselves for this sacred process in the Tao with one another. Let's get started with Tao Te Ching 23. The title for this chapter is Together in the Tao. It can also be translated as Together with the Tao. There is a couple of contexts, two contextual meanings here to be aware of. In the first context, the Tao is the all-inclusive Great Tao. If we were to use metaphors, we would say that if one is about to go across a forest, there are many paths. All the possible paths through the forest are metaphorically the Tao. In life, there are many paths that we can take. All of them, the totality thereof, would be the Great Tao. It includes every possible path that one can take. Therefore, the Tao in this context is that which underlies reality, the overall principle that is ultimately responsible for orchestrating everything in our universe. You and I cannot be here without the Tao as the basis for our own existence. Therefore, in everything that we do, we are together with the Tao. We cannot be separated or apart from it. That's the first context. The second, equally important context is the best possible path. As I said, there are many paths that we can take in life. And we already know some of them are better than others. Some are just different, like the direct route versus the scenic path. To reiterate, I wanted to talk about the Tao in the two different contexts that we have in front of us. The first context, as I mentioned, is the Great Tao, that which is inclusive of everything, the good as well as the bad. The second context that we are covering now is the best possible path for us. And what I just said a moment ago that might not have been captured by audio is that out of all the different paths that we can take, we know some of them are better than others, and we know some of them will take us down the wrong path, such as violence, contention, etc. So, to be with the right path for us, what it means is to identify what that is. And we pay attention to the guidance of the ancients due to their wisdom. And once we know what that path is, we go forth and stay on it. We follow the way, and we let it lead us to a good place or better place than where we are right now, or the best possible place. So it is important to keep this in mind when we talk about together in the Tao, or with the Tao, or on the path. It is the contextual meaning of picking and choosing the best possible path. If we did not have it, we would be lost. So that is the flip side. We can possibly be with loss instead of the Tao. So that is the title of this chapter. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the chapter itself. Dao De Jing 23. Spirit speech is natural. Thus, strong wind does not last all morning. Sudden rain does not last all day. What makes this so? Heaven and earth. Even heaven and earth cannot make it last. How can humans? Thus, those who follow the Tao are with the Tao. Those who follow virtue are with virtue. Those who follow loss are with loss. Those who are with the Tao is also pleased to have them. Those who are with virtue, virtue is also pleased to have them. Those who are with loss, loss is also pleased to have them. Those who do not trust sufficiently, others have no trust in them. So that is Dao De Jing 23. So one of the things that stand out right away is toward the end of this chapter, when it talks about the Tao being pleased to have those who are with the Tao. Now, from studying previous chapters, we already know that the Tao is not personified. The Tao does not feel emotions the way that humans do. So, just based on that, we can see the Tao being pleased to have those who are with the Tao is metaphorical language. So when we get to that line, we will delve into that with additional details. For now, though, what we should do is to take a look at the structure of this chapter and see if we can identify the different sections. As always, we begin scanning the lines top to bottom, looking for the Chinese characters that repeat themselves, indicating poetic construction. So in the second line and third line, I have highlighted two characters that repeat. They are syntactically in a similar position. They are the second and third characters from the end, respectively. And they are one character off because the second line begins with the character gu, which means thus or therefore. Without that character, it would be a matching poetic construction. We look down further and below line 3, we do not see any more repetition of the same pattern. So we are now in a position to mark it off as a section. This is the beginning section, the introductory section that talks about the wind and the rain. Then we look down further. In line 4 and 5, we see repeating characters again, except that in line 4, those two characters appear at the end, whereas in line 5, they're at the beginning. These characters are 天地, respectively, heaven and earth. And looking further down, we do not see any more repetitions of those two characters. We do see 7, 8, and 9 have the same characters repeating. Maybe a little difficult to see. Let me highlight them. Here they are. So with the highlighting, it is easy to pick them out visually, even for those who do not read ancient Chinese. So from 7, 8, and 9, we see 3 repeating characters, and they are all toward the end of the line or in the middle. And we will talk about exactly what they are. But for now, though, let's note that the 3 repeating patterns in 7, 8, and 9, they look completely different from the 2 character repetitions in 4 and 5. And looking at the lines, it is clear from the meaning that when we get to line 6, that's actually the end of the section there, ending with a question. So we can mark it off as a section here as well. So far, we had the first section that talks about the wind and the rain. Then we have the second section that talks about how heaven and earth cannot make them last. So how can human beings? So it makes sense as a subsection all by itself. So what about toward the bottom? What other repetitions can we see? Well, I think it should be relatively obvious that we have many repeating characters in 10, 11, and 12. In fact, the majority of the characters in those lines repeat themselves. It is easy to see, for instance, that the last 3 characters are exactly the same. And then we have the first 2 characters being exactly the same as well. So let me highlight those, make them easier to see. And right in the middle, we have the same character repeating itself, 者. And this allows us to see that the repetition from 10, 11, and 12, they look completely different from 7, 8, and 9. So that's the clue to us that we can mark them off as different sections. We now have a section 3 and a section 4, which is the final section. Section 3 talks about those who follow the Tao, those who follow virtue, and those who follow loss. So another way to say it is those who are with the Tao, those who are with virtue, and those who are with loss. Then the commentary from Lao Tzu in the last section is that no matter which one it is that people choose to follow, whatever that quality happens to be, it is glad to have them too. This is just the ancient Chinese way to say that whatever cause you enact in life, you will end up with the effect of that cause. Good cause, good effect. Bad cause, bad effect, and so on. So this is among the earliest written confirmation of the idea about the circular working of the karmic mechanism. Except that back in 2,500 years ago, at the time of Laozi, the term karma did not exist in ancient Chinese. It would make its way to ancient China hundreds of years later, coming in from India. So here we have the sectional analysis for 23. We're now ready to analyze the chapter line by line, starting with the first line. Line 1, Sparse speech is natural. So this is due to the sages' observations. They observe nature and they note everything in nature has a beginning and an end. No exception. It is the nature of everything to begin, run its course, and then come to an end, and perhaps transition to something else. So the bottom line, the conclusion that they had was that no earthly manifestation, no manifestation in the world can continue indefinitely. So even a lengthy storm that lasts days on end will eventually die down. And this idea is widely applicable to all aspects of life. The ancients noted that you can go forth into the forest, gather some firewood, get together some dry branches, and light a fire. You know this pile of dry wood will burn for a while, give off light and heat. And if the branches still contain moisture, you can expect smoke as well. So there's the beginning of the fire. There is the burning of it, which is the process. Then the fire, you know, will dwindle down to smoldering embers. At that point, you can observe that the wooden branches have transformed to burnt ash. So the same idea applies to everything else and certainly applies to weather. Now, nature and the Tao, these two have often been seen as synonymous or equivalent with one another. There are, however, a few distinctions. The Tao is silent. The Tao says nothing. Nature can express itself. In a story by Zhuangzi, Zhuangzi talks about how when the wind blows across the land, because the rocks, the mountains, and the cliffs have different shapes and sizes, it produces sound like a musical instrument. So nature has that certain way of expressing itself. But what the sages are noting, what Laozi is saying in this chapter, is that natural expressions will limit itself in some ways. In any kind of weather, no matter how bad it gets, the turbulence will eventually transition to calmness. So, noting all this, in order to cultivate harmony, we should keep all of that in mind. No matter how turbulent things get in life, eventually there has to be a transition to calmness in our lives as well. And when we apply this to communication, in this line, Lao Tzu specifically is referencing speech. Communication in tune with the Tao should be brief. That is, it should not drag on and on. It should come to an end. So the idea here with this line is to express yourself fully but concisely, then come to a full stop. Line 2. Thus, strong wind does not last all morning. So the two key characters I've identified here, they are the second and third characters respectively, and they mean powerful wind, whirlwind, hurricane winds. So Lao Tzu says it does not last all morning, and that is because when the ancients observed nature, they noted that such winds, no matter how powerful, they were always transient. And Lao Tzu uses the same observation to comment on human communication. In the context of human communication, strong wind is a metaphor pointing to forceful words. And it is exactly the kind of communication we want to reduce. And let me talk about that a little more. In English, we have an expression, blowing hot air, being a blowhard, being a gas bag or windbag. All of these expressions point to someone who keeps talking, but does not necessarily express anything that is meaningful or useful. And therefore, it's nothing more than the movement of hot air. And therefore, we need the discipline to speak in the opposite way. That is, we talk about substantial and practical things and then pause. So it's interesting to me that despite linguistic and cultural differences, East and West both use wind as metaphor for talking. The strong wind can also be someone who monopolizes a conversation. So with that in mind, our goal is to always give other people the time they need to speak their mind, which I would note is an increasingly rare courtesy in today's world. Strong wind referencing previous chapters can also be arrogant expressions, such as self-praise or boasting. Noting that, we remind ourselves to speak in humble but confident manner. No grandstanding, no lecturing other people. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, the strong wind as forceful communication, it can also be angry communication, communication at a louder volume. Just like a strong wind can get pretty loud. It is a metaphor for somebody yelling, screaming, or ranting. So again, looking at that, what we want to do is to remind ourselves to use the soft approach. It is about being more gentle, compassionate, and harmonious. We can make all the points we need to make gently and harmoniously without the hot air. So to continue on with strong winds, let me just talk about the common types of strong wind that we may encounter in life. There's complaints, by far the most common form. And I want to note that people who complain usually do not do anything to resolve the cause for the complaint. So it is more like complaining for the sake of complaints, not really interested in solutions. And a lot of these complaints are angry as well. So the typical common type of strong wind is usually sourced in anger. As I mentioned, loud voice, raised volume, ranting and raving. Just as strong winds can cause damage, in a similar way, angry words can cause damage to relationships. You and I have all encountered this in our lives, and there's probably going to be more as we continue forward in the journey of life. So, other than complaints, what else? Well, we have criticisms, which is related to complaints, but a little different. Some people like to point out problems, and perhaps it is sourced not just in anger, but also ego, because pointing out problems for some is a way to elevate themselves, at least in their minds. And when you go even beyond criticism, when it is even more anger-driven, you get to condemnation, the magnified form of criticism, not just pointing out problems, but also being accusatory, severe, harsh, and judgmental. It implies outright rejection, strong disapproval, without really any room for discussion, any room for growth. So this is the much more severe version of criticism. It's the public denouncement of somebody. Then things get personal. Scolding. Scolding is criticism, perhaps even condemnation, pointed directly at you, finding fault in you, pointing blame to you. So these are the strong winds that we can expect in life that we have seen. And we have also, when we talk about blowing hot air, we have also seen people being a windbag or gas bag when they speak in a pompous manner. It is pretentious, it's full of proclamations, grandstanding statements, full of aggressive assertions, also very common, and also meant to make oneself look good. By now, we can see it's quite clear the strong wind in human communication is tied to the ego. This is like the metaphorical hot air. Hot air inflates the balloon of external appearance. And the hot air metaphor suggests there's nothing of substance within that inflated exterior. And we see this in life. For instance, you may hear someone who claims to be an expert in some subject or another. They would use a lot of filler phrases, empty words that are meant to convey expertise, but really add no value. So those empty words, empty phrases are the hot air. Those are the hot air to inflate the balloon of the ego. We also see this in debates. As heated arguments, the strong wind in this case is driven by the desire to win and the desire to be right, to be proven correct, a powerful desire among human beings. We also see strong wind when someone makes aggressive assertions. So never mind debates. Even just in everyday conversation, people will be rather assertive. They will use strong emotions to make their point. And sometimes they feel like they need to do that to make up for the lack of substance. So some people say, if you have reason on your side, express those reasons. If you do not have reason on your side, pound the table. Use strong emotions to help you make your point and make up for the lack of substance. Lastly, such assertions, when you talk about aggressive assertions, usually about oneself, this is what we have seen in previous chapters. The sages, when they embrace oneness, they set a standard for the world and they watch for things that they will never do, such as boasting or praising themselves. So this is connected to the previous chapter. The sages are the standard or set the standard for everybody in the world, and therefore they refrain from anything, any expressions that can be seen as egocentric or arrogant. Next line. Sudden rain does not last all day. So we move from wind to rain. The sudden downpour, the first two characters that you see there, they are literally sudden and rain. So sudden downpour is sudden rain, unexpected shower. So this is similar to strong wind. Sudden rain is also something that we know cannot continue indefinitely. In this context, the suddenness can have multiple layers of meaning. So the first one, the obvious one, is the emotional outburst. So suddenly, someone is very excited or very emotional, and there's that outpouring of those emotions. That is a sudden rain right there. Then the other context is about interruptions in conversation. So when you are talking about something and suddenly the other person cuts in, not letting you finish, that is like encountering rain happening all of a sudden. Lastly, one more context is negative expressions. So looking at all three, for the emotional outburst, the rain we can see as a metaphor for tears, and that represents uncontrollable emotions. The negative impact is that outbursts are not helpful in resolving any issues. Furthermore, when we talk about emotions, the weather going from sunny to raining and back again, that is metaphorically speaking for shifting moods, moods that can change at the drop of a hat. Now, the second context, the interruptions. I think you and I know that these are some of the most unpleasant tactics that we encounter in daily life. You want to talk about some things. In the middle of your statement, the other person cuts in and says, well, what about so-and-so? It is a common way to throw people off balance. It can also be a manifestation of arrogance. To be arrogant to such an extent that you don't give the other person the courtesy of finishing what they want to say. Asking questions while the other person is still speaking. asking a question, but then not let the other person finish answering. Even before they finish responding, you cut them off again. And the purpose is to dismiss the point the other person is making even before they are done making it, waving them off. Like, yeah, I know all about that. And then say what you want to say. It's the lack of courtesy that's becoming increasingly prevalent. Lastly, I want to focus about negative expressions. Rain, seen as negative, one thing to point out is that rain can be seen as a positive as well. In an agricultural society, rain would be seen as a good thing because rain would ensure bountiful harvest and provide a lifeline for the people. But then, as the yin and yang symbol would suggest, there's a negative side that comes with the positive. For instance, too much rain and flooding will follow. And just like strong wind, it'll cause damage. So, focusing on the negativity, we have expressions in English that are quite similar. In English, we may talk about raining on somebody's parade. To rain on somebody's parade idiomatically just means to spoil or ruin someone's plans, or maybe spoil their moment of happiness. It is often used to describe situations where someone's negative comments or actions will dampen another person's enthusiasm or excitement. Similar to when we say throw cold water on someone or a wet blanket on something. Another idiomatic expression, we say when it rains, it pours. This phrase suggests that when bad things happen, they often occur all at once. So this is talking about a series of unfortunate events happening in quick succession. And we also sometimes talk about stormy relationships or stormy situations. And this describes relationship characterized by frequent arguments, turmoil, similar to the turbulent nature of a storm. So with these contexts of negativity, we can see the rain coming to an end naturally will be in everybody's best interest. Both rain and the wind we have seen can symbolize the negative kind of events in life as well as the negative kind of communication. Out of the two, the wind adds the nuance of arrogance and pomposity when we talk about hot air, and that's usually sourced in a presumption of superiority. Out of the two, when we talk about the rain, it adds the nuance of interruption, as we have discussed, and this is often used to disrupt others to try to dominate a conversation. And when we apply this to the level of the warring states, the kingdoms back in the time of Lao Tzu, it was the king or the ruler who issues too many unreasonable commands. That is like the sudden rain that is like the strong wind that is blowing, it also cannot last. So you can move that context to today's world. When we have a system in society with many burdensome regulations, many orders, many things that just don't make sense, laws and rules that come at us in quick succession, that also cannot last. And the advice from Lao Tzu would be, in a situation like that, no matter how bad things get, this too will pass. So, going back to communication for just a moment, I want to point out that in the Tao Te Ching, there are many references to communication. Lao Tzu talks about human communication quite a bit, and I have taken some examples from several chapters other than this one. In this particular chapter we're studying now, Lao Tzu tells us our communication ought to be clear and concise. We should express what we mean, and then we should come to an end. We should stop. So other pearls of wisdom about communication, we can find them throughout the Tao Te Ching. For instance, Tao Te Ching 56. Those who know do not talk. Those who talk do not know. So this tells us speaking too much can be a sign of ignorance. It would be better to let your actions, rather than your words, demonstrate what you know. Then, Tao Te Ching 63. One who makes promises lightly must deserve little trust. One who sees many easy tasks must encounter much difficulty. So this is a cautionary note. Lao Tzu is saying, do not make promises without due consideration, and never underestimate challenges. And making promises, of course, is part of human communication. It is what we need to be careful of. Then, Tao Te Ching 66. Thus, if sages wish to be over people, they must speak humbly to them. So this is a very specific instruction from Lao Tzu to be humble, especially for someone in a high-level position of authority. That higher level of authority requires the more humble way of communication. Lao Tzu would even say, the higher you are positioned, the lower, more humble you must be. And then we have Tao Te Ching 81, the last chapter of the Tao Te Ching. This is where Lao Tzu says, true words are not beautiful. Beautiful words are not true. So this is definitely a penetrating insight, because in our world, we hear people talk about things in glowing terms only to discover the reality is less than ideal. Therefore, as Tao cultivators, we have the task to speak the truth rather than words that may sound good but are actually untrue. So let me wrap up this slide by repeating again what Lao Tzu says in this particular chapter. Strong wind does not last all morning. Sudden rain does not last all day. As a reminder that we should be brief in addition to all the other pearls of wisdom, we need to take everything that Lao Tzu says about communication into account. So here I want to combine the two lines to talk about strong wind and sudden rain together. We extend this teaching from communication to our lives. So in the context of our lives, it points the rain and the wind represent adversities. In fact, in Chinese-speaking society, when these lines are quoted, people are invariably talking about frustrations and difficulties in life. They use these lines to point out that the current situation, no matter how challenging it will be, will pass sooner or later. So we know the life journey is not always sunny weather, and if we were to use the sailing metaphor, it is not always smooth sailing. So what we have just talked about is that the wind and the rain represent when things are not going so well for us. And what we know about the weather is that it isn't something that we can control. Just like the weather, there are many events that we come across in life that are also beyond our control. So the lack of control can become a source of frustration and anxiety. And if that is the case, it adds even more negativity to the mix. Negative events can keep us from making the progress we want to make in life. So, negativity in life. In Buddhism, the Buddha taught that good things never last. He framed this in the context of suffering. He initially started out teaching about all the problems that we can encounter in life. His students will point out that while there are bad things in life, there are also good things. Then the Buddha says, well, the good things never last. That's part of the suffering that we have in life. In the Tao, the sages note the other side of the equation. It isn't just the good things don't last. The bad things also cannot be lasting. The hardships also cannot last. We know that you and I, when we're caught in a misfortune, we're suffering and it seems endless. There seems to be no hope. When am I going to get out of it? I can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. That's because we forget there is no power that can keep the bad thing going on indefinitely. In the West, we have the adage, very old Persian tradition that says this too shall pass, no matter what it is. And Lao Tzu is telling us, as powerful as heaven and earth may be, there's no way that they can make the wind and the rain continue on. Speaking of the wind and the rain, let me zoom in on those contextually in both communication and in life. Starting with the strong wind. So I want to lay out a couple of columns here. One column for communication, the other one for life. When we talk about strong wind and communication, this will summarize what we talked about a moment ago. It can be unnecessarily forceful words. We talked about hot air. That's pompous proclamations. And remember, whenever we talk about strong wind in communication, it can be the aggressive, in-your-face style of communication, loud voice, screaming, yelling, etc. There's also the monopolizing of a conversation. A conversation should be an exchange, a two-way street. Monopolizing seeks to turn that into a one-way street. There's also sense of urgency, stress. When someone is speaking quickly at you, urging you to do something, don't waste any time, do it now. This is trying to pressure others into taking a particular action or making a decision. It is a favorite tactic of scammers everywhere. The idea is that apply enough pressure and the other person doesn't have time to think if the action to be undertaken is a wise course of action. So, strong wind can apply to events in life as well. First, changes that bring problems. This is where we go back to the metaphor, the winds of change. The winds of change are ever present in our lives. And sometimes the change makes everything worse, not better. We have all seen such changes. And it seems as if in the last few decades, there's been even more changes because of all the disruptions on a worldwide scale, like technological advances causing job loss in whole sectors of the economy. And just when you think things are starting to settle down, they shift again, forcing you to figure out how to cope all over again. Then, wind, the strong wind can be forces that are destructive. We know destructive winds can tear off the roof of a house. Tornadoes will do even more, destroy entire house, entire communities, neighborhoods, many houses all at once. So in life, the tornadoes that we encounter in life are the disasters that cause us widespread damage. Perhaps in personal finance, perhaps in relationships or friendships, and perhaps in your peace of mind. Then, strong wind, the wind that blows you off course. This is back to the sailing metaphor again in regards to the voyage of life. When a ship encounters a storm, the powerful winds can force the ship far away from its intended course. Applying that metaphor to life, it just means circumstances can force you to change your plans. In the Tao, someone who was on the path, who had been on the path, may stray from it like a ship going off course due to a negative event or a series of negative events. Then we have headwinds against you. So this is like the wind that blows you off course, except that such winds come at you from the left or right from an angle, whereas a headwind is a wind that blows directly against you, blowing in the opposite direction that you are headed. And this can be an aircraft, a ship. Either way, it makes it much more difficult to travel forward. In life, it just means misfortune occurring in your life, making it difficult for you to make progress in it, like running out of resources for a particular goal that you have in mind. Perhaps this is an unexpected expense that forces you to dig into savings meant for something else. So with the slide at the moment, we see the two different ways that we can apply the strong wind to communication and to life. So what about the rain? We start with communication. We've talked about the sudden interruptions, cutting people off, not letting them finish talking. There's also discouraging negativity. This is being the naysayer, as we talked about, to rain on somebody's parade, to be critical, discouraging, or dismissive. Now, when we encounter this kind of sudden rain in life, people who do that, they may say, look, I'm just being realistic. Or they may say, look, I'm just trying to help you. I want you to level set expectations so you can avoid disappointment. We also know that at the same time, they are dashing your hopes, squashing your motivation. You end up much less enthused about something that you really want to do. And then we have the emotional outbursts that we discussed, rain as a metaphor for tears. This would be like a sudden barrage of emotional anguish, full of blame and accusations. And then we have a disagreement that is surprising, that's coming up out of the blue, a conflict that was not anticipated, something that was surfacing without warning, an unpleasant surprise. So these are all possible meaning in the communication side for the sudden rain. What about for life? So first, something that's disruptive, a disruption in one's plans. The sudden rain can represent that. We have often seen how the sudden rain can put a planned outdoor event on hold or perhaps force a change of venue. So in life overall, we can come across disruptions that make us have no choice but to put things on hold or change some aspect of our plans. Next, the sudden rain can be a test of preparedness. Rain symbolizes contingencies, highlighting the unpredictable nature of life. Just like the weather can be unpredictable, even today with improved weather forecast, we can still be taken by surprise. Certainly in life, if one does not think ahead to foresee potential problems before they occur, one can be caught off guard. So when the sudden rain comes, are you prepared? That is the question. Next, we have the rain representing a moment of need. This is just like when we say you have to save for a rainy day. when the rainy day comes, it's a time of need. Now, in life, we know it can definitely happen that the rainy day comes before any saving has been accumulated. So this will be related to the test of preparedness. And oftentimes, people will put the emphasis when they say saving on a rainy day, it's about the financial resources. And number 4, we have a disaster at a large scale. So the rain can represent storm, hurricanes, heavy downpour that causes disasters like mudslides and flooding. So in life, the heavy downpour can be like an emotional or life overload. A situation where what you get is one stress after another until things fall apart. Mudslides can symbolize the collapse of stability. One moment you think you are on solid ground, but then it gives way and disintegrates right where you stand. So none of us wants to have that happen in life. So continue on. Strong wind does not last all morning. Sudden rain does not last all day. So these are the reasons that Tao cultivators will maintain disciplines. Upon encountering strong winds and sudden rain, Tao cultivators know that patience is important. It is helpful to realize the transience of everything, that everything comes and goes, and this includes the most difficult and the darkest times. The other realization that can be very helpful is that we are not helpless. There is always something we can do. There is light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes we cannot see it, but it's still there. Next, perceptiveness. Tao cultivators maintain their ability to perceive. They will consider that everything happens for some reasons, and therefore we should think about this situation, this wind and rain, this negativity, how will this put me to the test? How will this be a test of my character? And the other question that they would also ask, stemming from perceptiveness, is that what are the lessons that I can see in this current event? What are the lessons that I'm meant to learn from all this? To be perceptive can help you uncover the meaning, the reason for things being the way they are right now. Then there's perseverance. It just means not giving up on hope. It also means continue to do the right thing, to forge ahead on the path that we know is the right path. So by now, in the third of this list, we can see that everything we're talking about here applies to present-day situations, the lives that we are living. In all of this, in our lives, as well as when I say in the world, you and I can draw strength from the Tao. The Tao can be what keeps us going. And let me also talk about preparation. This is looking ahead. This is one of the best things we can do in a moment of darkness. It's based on the understanding that things will shift again. When the wind and the rain are done, we will transition to calm weather and sunshine. Given that's the case, what are the things that I can do to prepare for that? So, is the economy not doing well, and that is the wind and the rain? Are companies perhaps going out of business, people losing their jobs? If that is the case, what are the things that I can do to prepare from when the economy goes back on the upswing again? Perhaps it is time to renew myself, upgrade my knowledge. So when things change, when the economy recovers, I am positioned to benefit from greater demands of my skill set. So my remark on all of this is that the weather, the wind and the rain, it can turn bad, and sometimes without any warning. So as Tao cultivators, you and I can do our best to look ahead and prepare ourselves. At the same time, we also have to accept the fundamental unpredictability of life. It will sometimes simply defy any attempts at predictions. When the weather does turn bad, what we ought to do is not remain rooted to the spot, to get rained on, to get soaked. You and I can seek shelter to wait out the bad weather. This is seeking refuge in the Tao in a life context. And the Tao, in this case, covers the teachings of the Tao as well as the community, like this group. So outside, it may turn dark and cloudy. But as Lao Tzu points out, that darkness cannot last. We may not see the sun at the moment, but it is only temporary. Intellectually, we know the sun hasn't gone away. We know the sun is right behind the dark clouds. When clouds dissipate, as it must, we're going to see the sun again. So I want to encourage everyone to apply this idea to all of us living our lives right now. Next line, line 4. What makes this so? Heaven and earth. So this is Lao Tzu asking the question, why is it that strong winds and sudden rains never last? Who or what is responsible for things being the way they are? Then Lao Tzu answers his own question, it's heaven and earth. So the important thing to note here is that Lao Tzu is pointing not to a deity. Heaven and earth are synonymous with nature and the Tao. So not a divine being. This is a departure from what people were used to in ancient times. All over the world, the default belief for most human beings pointed to the gods. A particular deity, the rain god, was responsible for starting, controlling, and stopping the rain. Thunder and lightning might be assigned to another deity, and certainly the most well-known being Norse mythology. So if the rain god was somehow displeased, what happens then? one will end up with a drought. The crops you planted will fail, a grave concern for the ancients. And this became the rationale for human or animal sacrifice to pacify the deity. This was yet another unconventional idea from the Tao. This is a departure, as I said, from the customary assumptions, which was divine control. Now, in other usage of the Tao Te Ching, heaven and earth pointed to the world, the setting in which the myriad things live. Here, it is just the natural world, or nature itself. So, we are now getting close to the top of the hour, so I will end our discussion here and move on to summarize what we have talked about today. First, I want to reiterate the guidance from Lao Tzu about communication, about the wind and the rain. So, the first thing that the wisdom of Lao Tzu would teach us is to listen more and talk less. His wisdom on sparing speech is emphasizing clarity and the natural flow of communication. So that means choosing our words wisely without excess. No one likes it when it is too windy or rains too much. In a similar way, we know from experience that the person who talks too much is disliked by others, including ourselves. Therefore, we need to be present, listen, and understand to improve the response that we give. The listening part, I would say, is more important than the talking part. People have a need to feel heard, so we need to hear them out. Number 2, think before speaking. This is something that I need to learn and practice myself, because we have all seen how speaking thoughtlessly will get people in trouble. This is so commonplace. And it is certainly what we don't want for ourselves. So we need to pause, organize our thoughts for greater clarity and precision before expressing those thoughts. Next, Lao Tzu would say, use simple language. Simplicity in communication is better than complexity. Complex or excessive verbiage can be distracting. It can detract from the point you want to make. So we should aspire to be like the best communicators throughout history. These are the people who historically have been able to always express complex ideas in a simple way without losing the essence. Their expressions are simple enough so anyone can understand them. That is the mark of a masterful communicator. 4, focus on the core message. This means delivering your point without dragging in unnecessary details. Sometimes we see people ramble on and on. They meander to side issues. They say, by the way, there's this other thing. And how many times have we seen this? They talk about the side issues. By the time they're done talking about them and they want to return to the point that they were making in the first place, they'll say, where was I? What was I talking about? Let's get back on track. that is a sure sign of someone not following the Tao of communication. And of course, in this chapter, Lao Tzu says, well, the wind and the rain, they stop. So we should too. We should give other people a chance to speak their minds as well. It isn't just us talking. A conversation is something that leaves room for all parties involved. So with that summary, I want to move to share the Tao. The easiest way to access Tao resources is to visit my author website, dereklin.com. There, you can click on links and go to the web page where you will find everything listed, such as Taoism.net, with information and also about this meeting. Facebook community, you can ask questions, discuss your thoughts with others. Or YouTube, where you can watch of all our meetings. My author page, you can find books, audiobooks, continuing explanation. You can also go directly with a web address, dereklin.com/links. See. You can use these resources to share the Tao with the people you know who may be interested. You can share your experience with others through your comments in Facebook or YouTube. If you find my books or audiobooks to be helpful, you can post your review on Amazon to help others discover. This is the path that so I can say sharing the Tao has benefited me personally in every aspect of life. I'd like to invite you along with me to share the Tao. Travel together in the of life. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.